Wilba the Pig Princess is one of the characters added to Don't Starve along with the Hamlet DLC. She has some interesting perks, such as having extra hunger and getting free materials from pigmen. However, by far the coolest thing about Wilba has got to be her Werepig form. Werepig Wilba has a lot of similarities to the Weremoose. However, one of her biggest differences is that while the moose has strong defenses, as well as effective AoE options, Werewilba's build is more geared towards agility and avoiding damage. Don't Starve Hamlet players are probably very familiar with how well Wilba fares against seasonal bosses like Deerclops and Berger, as well as DLC exclusive ones like the Pugalisk or Iron Hulk. But how does Wilba stack up against the mighty raid bosses of Don't Starve together? If you've ever pondered this question, then stick around as I explain how to be an S Tier Wilba. Before we start the run, let's go over the game plan. As mentioned in the intro, Wilba has two forms. In her normal form, she has 150 HP, 200 hunger, and only 100 sanity. In addition to her having a lower sanity cap, she also loses 50% more sanity from darkness, which means I'm going to be dealing with a lot more nightmare creatures than usual. Other than that, she's basically Wilson except with the added perk of non-hostile pigmen having a chance to randomly give her an item since they recognize Wilba as royalty. While normal Wilba is pretty bland, Werewilba is a completely different story. If Wilba consumes 2 monster food items within 4 minutes or is exposed to the light of a full moon, Wilba will transform into her Werepig state. If she transforms from a full moon, her transformation will last until the start of the next day. If she transforms from monster meat, Wilba will stay in wereform for 8 minutes, plus 4 minutes for every piece of monster food she consumes during her transformation. Wilba doesn't have a visual were meter, so it's important to take note of the time of day in which she transforms and how much monster meat she has eaten since, in order to calculate how much time she has remaining. Like regular werepigs, Werewilba is completely healed and her maximum health increases from 150 to 350. She also gains complete night vision, making her immune to Charlie, is also unable to take freeze or overheat damage, regenerates health at a rate of 1 HP every 2 seconds, gets a melee attack that does handbat damage, and she gains a massive speed increase of 50%. Wilba needs all the speed she can get, since while in were form, she's unable to utilize her hand, body, and head equipment slots, meaning she's going to be taking full damage from all attacks. Her 350 HP might seem like a lot until you realize that the football helmet gives the average survivor 750 effective HP and effectively multiplies all healing items by 5. Without armor, even with her 350 HP, Werewilba can legitimately get one shot by things like the Celestial Champion's Blender attack or lasers, as well as volleys of boom shrooms from Toadstool. So that's probably Wilba's greatest weakness. She's really fragile compared to everyone else. Although she can't equip anything, she can still access items in her inventory while in were form. This actually is a significant advantage compared to Woody's were forms, since she's able to heal herself up with food, pick things up off the ground, and use powerful items like the pan flute. Her were form also has the downside of multiplying her hunger drain by 5, so every time I use Wilba's were form, I'm going to have to be sure I have a ton of food stocked up. This kind of works well with the fact that she can't equip armor, since I'm going to end up chugging a ton of healing food if I take a lot of hits, so all this food I'll be eating will keep Wilba from starving. Since we're on the topic of were forms, you might be thinking that the moonstorms will be an issue, but that's not the case, since Wilba also starts the game with a silver necklace, an item that will prevent her from transforming while equipped. We've covered pretty much everything about Wilba's were form except for her melee attack, and there's a reason for that. Werewilba can't equip any items, so she can only attack by slashing her enemies using her claws. Each slash deals 59.5 damage, and Wilba can slash an infinite number of times, so it's like she gets a fresh handbat. A fresh handbat's 59.5 damage is really unimpressive compared to the offensive options that many of the DSD characters have to work with. Plus, Wilba doesn't have a skill tree, so she doesn't get boosted damage based on her lunar or shadow alignment. So you might think her slash attack is not all that great for taking down raid bosses with tens of thousands of HP. However, this isn't true at all. First, a weapon with infinite durability that never spoils is a huge boon when you're up against bosses with enormous health pools. Second, not only can she use her claws to attack, but she can also use them to chop trees, dig, mine rocks, and hammer with them, which lets her acquire a ton of resources quickly and at no cost. However, the main reason her melee attack is great for a boss rush has got to be animation cancelling. The attack speeds that Wilba can achieve are ridiculous. Just look at the comparison between her attack speed with and without animation cancelling. So although she doesn't hit nearly as hard as the top tiers, her rapid attack speed severely closes the gap and puts her above even solid combat picks like the Weremoose or pre-skill tree Wigfrid. So that summarizes the game plan. I'll be tearing apart bosses with Werewilba's insane attack speed while trying not to get one shot or die from starvation. Now let's finally get into the run. The run starts off the same as all my other ones. My first move after spawning in is to pick grass, twigs, and flint. After I have a good amount of the first two and enough flint for a pickaxe, I started searching for the mosaic biome, which contains all the essential minerals a DST player needs when they're just getting started in the game. This world has twiggy trees instead of saplings, and juicy berries instead of the normal types, which are both really good if you're planning on running around the map on a beefalo. After picking up minerals and mining enough gold veins, I headed out to the mosaic in search of the beefalo. While searching for them, I got living logs from the totally normal trees and started a forest fire so I could come back to the area and get a bunch of charcoal. It took me longer than usual to find the beefalo in this run. I ended up running through the swamp, the Pig King village, the Moonstone forest, a meteor field, and a second pig village before finally finding them towards the second half of day 2. After finding the beefalo, I fed it twigs and carrots to start the taming process. Then I shaved the only other one in the biome at night, and killed the one I shaved because I needed 4 beefalo wool in order to make the saddle. As you can see, it's only day 3 and I'm already fighting nightmare creatures, which is all because Wilba's 50% extra vulnerability to insanity. After killing the crawling horror, I dug up grass tufts and decided to settle at the intersection of the forest, pig village, and bee queen biome, as it was pretty central to most of the points of interest. Since I was in the middle of a forest, I chopped down a bunch of trees, crafted the alchemy engine, made a football helmet for protection, and got the saddle so I could start exploring the map at super speed. I then flew to the nearest sinkhole before my vision was obscured by darkness, and picked a couple light bulbs. This sinkhole led to the green mushy forest, which is actually a really important biome for Wilba, as you'll see later in the run. At the dawn of the next day, I headed upstairs to the surface and back to my base to craft the lantern. At this point, I would usually start to search for the suspicious marble pieces. However, instead I want to rush the ruins for Starcaller staffs, because I won't be available to do the event on day 31. Before heading down there, I kill a bunch of spiders to get silk, and make myself a piggyback to expand my inventory slots by 4. Because I wanted my beefalo to be a bit more tamed before I headed to the ruins, I spent a few more days on the surface fighting spiders for their silk and monster meat, and hammering pig houses. In the middle of day 6, I finally head down into the caves. Once down here, I stopped at the red mush tree forest to mine a bunch of rocks for fossil pieces, before heading to the ruins. The fossils are needed to successfully complete the Moonstone event on day 11. While searching the red musk tree, I came across Toadstool, which is both lucky, since I won't have to waste time searching for him later, but also concerning, since he usually never spawns attached to it, which means cave world generation might have been messed up. After getting 2 fossil pieces, I headed out of the red musk tree forest and located the wilds. What I'd usually do at this point is run straight to one of the ruins branches. However, before I do that, I grab almost a full stack of lichen because I'll need to keep my beefalo fed for an entire game day, and it'll be useful for keeping Werewilba from starving. After getting a stack of the stuff, I located a ruins branch, mined some statues for Thulecite, and crafted a Thulecite medallion to locate the Ancient Guardian. His revealed position showed that the labyrinth was in the same branch as I was. So after getting to the entrance, I fed my beefalo a ton of lichen, because Werewilba can't ride beefalo, so I'll need to almost max out its hunger in order to keep it taming while I'm off killing everything in the ruins. So I feed it until it farts, and then eat 2 monster meat in order to transform. One very important thing to note if you're taming beefalo as Wilba is that after transforming, do not left click on your beefalo, because Wilba will attack it even if it's fully tamed, bound to a bell, and saddled. After picking up a bunch of lichen for my own hunger, I headed to the labyrinth. Full night vision plus Wilba's super speed makes navigating the labyrinth a breeze. As usual, I keep myself on the edge in order to not trigger the spiders. Still using the Thulecite medallion, I located the Ancient Guardian's arena and run right up to him to start Wilba's first boss fight. H is one of the easiest bosses in the run, and I've covered this fight many times in previous videos. He has 10,000 HP, which is far more than any boss in Solo Don't Starve. But that's irrelevant to Werewilba, since she shreds him with her insanely fast slash attacks. Like Woody, her night vision makes this fight way easier than the typical character. Add her super speed into the equation, and you can dodge AG while playing very aggressively. In Phase 2, AG starts to drip Nightmare Fuel and spawns Shadow Tentacles. These things can be very dangerous to Wilba, since their attack range can be deceptively large and they aren't the easiest to spot. They deal 60 damage and slap 2 times in a row. For Werewilba, who has no armor, one double slap means a third of your health is gone. Getting slapped by multiple Shadow Tentacles is pretty much instant death. Therefore, I'd highly recommend playing Phase 2 with much more caution than Phase 1. After AG is defeated, he spawns the large ornate chest. Werewilba can pick things up and use items in her inventory, but she can't open chests. So I grab the loot off the ground and head out of the labyrinth to make use of the remaining time I have in Werepig form. I use it to rip apart a bunch of clockwork bishops and knights. The knights are easily kited since I'm moving so fast and attacking so rapidly. Werewilba's movement speed is fast enough to dodge the bishop's lasers, but since my HP was full and Wilba regenerates health over time, I decided to just tank them. While I wait for my health to regenerate, I mine statues for Thulecite and gems, since Werewilba is a pickaxe with infinite durability. All the while, I'm keeping myself fed with Lichen. Lichen does reduce Wilba's sanity, but that doesn't matter since Werewilba tears through nightmare creatures just as easily as everything else. Once I feel my 8 minutes are up, I head back to my beefalo and try to keep myself busy until the wear timer is depleted. As normal Wilba, I pick up my piggyback and head back into the labyrinth in order to loot the large ornate chest. Once I got everything I wanted, I headed to one of the broken pseudoscience stations, upgraded it with Thulecite, and crafted 2 star collar staffs, a deconstruction staff, and a pick/axe. Then I left the ancient key and all the ruins minerals and headed out of the caves. It's day 10 and I've already located the moonstone, so I'm not in a real rush to get set up. Therefore, after placing the walls and blocking off the entrance with fossils and berry bushes, I rode around the forest while killing spiders and hammering pig houses for the resources. Before the full moon on day 11, I fed my beefalo a bunch, put it away, and once dusk became night, Wilba transformed into her rare form, which coincided with the start of the moonstone event. The barrier that I made around the entrance wasn't perfect, so I did have to do a bunch of fighting in order to take out some of the hounds and pigs, but overall it went pretty smoothly. Once the Star Caller's transformation was complete, all the enemies petrified and I mined them for moon rocks, retrieved the fossil pieces, and picked the moon caller staff. After getting back to base, I headed to the pig village and started building houses. I think my goal was to get around 15. One of my next tasks was to assemble the suspicious marble in preparation for the Shadow Pieces fight. I had already found the set piece before I went to the ruins, so I delivered the bishop head from the birchnut biome. On my way back to base, I stopped at the pig village to build even more houses. I then deconstructed the mooncaller staff to get the iridescent gem and decided to get the archives out of the way. So I went into the caves and headed from the green mushy forest to the blue and into the lunar grotto. Then I mined my way through the blocked off entrance to the archives, navigated through the maze, and socketed the iridescent gem to bring this ancient biome back to life. With power restored, I got the distilled knowledge from the correct toilet, completed the puzzle to obtain the astral detector blueprint, mined 2 statues for materials, and headed back to the surface. Back up top, I continuously activated the 2 detectors at the same time in order to triangulate the position of the first sanctum piece. I ended up finding it right next to a mosquito pond. Activating the detectors again, I eventually dug up the second sanctum piece in the beefalo biome. The astral detectors have 10 uses each. However, for those of you who don't know, while the detectors are activated, you can hammer them to get all their materials back, which lets you craft a brand new one. With both sanctum pieces dug up, I used the astral detectors to point me in the direction of Lunar Island. Lunar Island would have to wait a bit though, because it was day 17 and I hadn't assembled all the suspicious marble pieces yet. So I proceeded to deliver the rook nose from the Dragonfly Desert and the nighthead from the Mandrake Forest to the set piece to complete one of the biggest tasks of the run. I then went to the swamp to get a bunch of reeds in order to craft the birdcage and multiple pan flutes. Unlike with my other boss rushes, Wilba heavily relies on pierogies since she takes full damage in her were form, which means mass burst healing is really valuable. After building the birdcage, I used the crockpots to make a bunch of steamed twigs since, while paddling to Lunar, I'll be off my beefalo for an extended period of time, and the massive hunger that steamed twigs provides will keep my beefalo taming while this happens. Once I felt I was ready, I launched the raft off the coast of Dragonfly Desert and paddled towards Lunar. Once there, I picked up a bunch of kelp stalks off the beach since they will provide me a zero maintenance renewable source of vegetables for pierogies once I replant them at base. Then I found the 3 fissures located next to each other and assembled all the pieces in order to complete the celestial altar. At the altar, I turned 2 boards and some moon glass into 2 glass cutters, then ran back to the boat and paddled to the mainland. It was now day 20, which means winter and more importantly the Shadow Pieces fight is tomorrow. Once back at base, I made more steamed twigs to keep my beefalo taming while Wilba is in her were form. I then used the kelp fronds, monster meat and eggs I got from the bird to make a bunch of pierogies. Once all the preparations were complete, I made a dwarf star and maxed out my beefalo's hunger. Then I left it there and headed to the Shadow Pieces fight. I then assembled the pieces and ate 2 monster meat to turn into the beast. After Wilba finishes her extremely loud roaring animation, I ripped apart the Knight statue to summon the first raid boss of this run. In the first phase, I tried to end the Shadow Knight as quickly as possible. Normally I wouldn't really care about getting hit in this phase, however since Wilba takes full damage, I tried to avoid everything except the Knight. Once the pieces level up to 2, they both gain thousands of health and have multiplied their attack power, making them legitimate boss tier enemies. As fast as Werewilba is, there's no way she can dodge the bishop's teleport, so I try my best to only get hit once and end it as quickly as possible while keeping my health relatively high with pierogies. After the bishop dies, the level 2 rook evolves into its final form. His HP has more than doubled, and his attacks have gotten way stronger, faster, and have increased range. Werewilba is fast, but her 50% extra movement speed alone isn't enough to outright dodge these. It's for this reason that I located the fight near a road. The 30% movement speed increase of roads allows Wilba to move as fast as a rider beefalo, which gives her way more speed than what's necessary to dodge the rook. For any other character, I'd say this would be a walk in the park. However, there's still a hint of danger that remains for Werewilba, since, unless she's basically at max health, the Shadow Rook can two-shot her. After tearing the sky to shreds with her razor-sharp claw attacks, Wilba defeats her first raid boss. Just like what happened with the Ancient Guardian, Wilba still has a ton of time left in the transformation. Since I transformed at night, I know that Wilba will remain in were form until the following night, so I use this time to slaughter hordes of spiders and spider dens for their silk and monster meat, as well as deal with the hound wave. At night, Wilba became normal again, and I spent the next day and a half planting the kelp fronds and preparing for the next boss fight. On day 24, I started my search for the no-eyed deer and Klaus. I began at the small birchnut biome, but I found nothing there. I managed to find the no-eyed deer at Pig King, but the loot stash wasn't there, so it had to be somewhere in the mosaic biome. On the way to the mosaic, I used the pan flute to put the guardian pigs to sleep in order to swipe the terrarium. Then I began searching the mosaic biome, and ended up finding the stash at the very edge of it. After putting my beefalo away from the fight, I planted some spider dens near the sack so I could get a little extra monster meat and silk, and then use the deer antler on the loot stash in order to summon Klaus. Klaus is the second raid boss that Wilba will be fighting, as well as the least dangerous of them all. He has 10,000 HP in his first phase, and only directly attacks you with double swipes from time to time. Each swipe only deals 37.5 damage, so where Wilba can take quite a few of these, despite having no armor. Klaus will also make his gem deer cast either a fire or ice spell. Both of these are a joke to Wilba, because her immunity to freeze and overheat damage, plus health regeneration, means she's taking no damage, and her super speed makes escaping the ice spell extremely easy. I'd say the most dangerous thing to her are the gem deers, since they hit harder than Klaus himself, and getting hit by them might stun you enough to let Klaus pull off a combo. After Klaus's health goes down to 5,000, he spawns 2 Krampus, which I kill by attacking once and then dodging again and again. These guys also hit harder than Klaus, and they can attack very quickly, so it's important to kite them well. Once Klaus's health goes down to 0, he dies and gets revived by the life-giving amulet. Other than his new pounce attack and screaming every once in a while, his attack pattern is no different from phase 1. Since Werewilba has super speed, dodging the pounce is extremely easy, so this phase might involve a bit more dodging, but I wouldn't say it's more difficult than phase 1. As Klaus drops dead for the second time, Werewilba has successfully defeated her second raid boss. Like the Ancient Guardian and Shadow Pieces, I have to find something to do while I wait for her transformation timer to run out. So I murder all the tall birds in the mosaic and take their eggs so I can eventually turn them into tall Scotch eggs, which are in my opinion the best crockpot recipe for Wilba. Once back in her regular form, I use Klaus's antler to open the stash and I get both the Bee Queen crown and Bundling Wrap blueprint, which are extremely good Klaus drops, but at the same time are pretty much useless to me since I'm going to be killing Bee Queen anyway. After picking up the wax paper, I head back to base, make a few more pierogies, and activate the corrupted terrarium because I'll be fighting the twins come nighttime. In order to give myself some time to be normal Wilba before the next night, I transform into Werewilba at the start of dusk and kill time by doing some deforestation and fighting tree guards. When dusk turns to night, the twins enter the constant and I panflute everything in the area to sleep. Then I start attacking Spasmatism. The twins can be really dangerous for Werewilba since they deal 135 damage per charge, which means they can 3-shot her even if she's at max health. However, Wilba has 100% night vision and super speed, which makes dodging the twins' attacks easier than normal. Once Spasmatism gets dropped to 3000 HP, he enters phase 2, which can be really dangerous for Werewilba, since he can one-shot her if she gets caught up in a chain charge. Knowing this, I play a bit more cautiously to ensure that I don't get hit. Because Wilba is attacking so quickly, Spasmatism dies with plenty of night to spare. The next day, I spend the rest of the were form killing tree guards, chopping trees, and crafting boards. As regular Wilba, I activate the terrarium and made a bunch of meaty stew because I was starving. At night, Retinator popped into existence and I fought it the same as Spasmatism, except with a little less caution since this guy is easier to dodge and his minions aren't that big of a deal. With Retinator defeated, that makes 3 raid bosses down, just 6 more to go. The next one on the list is Bee Queen. However, it will be a few days until I'm ready to fight her. So in the meantime, I went to the caves to restock on light bulbs, picked all the cactus in Dragonfly Desert, and cleared out the Bee Queen arena. I also finally got around to turning all those tall bird eggs into the tall Scotch eggs crockpot dish. Each restores 150 hunger and 60 HP, making them great for Werewilba due to her massive hunger drain and lack of armor. On the night of day 30, I hung out in the Dragonfly Desert so that Deerclops would spawn there instead of right on my base. I wasn't ready to kill him yet, but at least I knew where he was. On day 31, I headed to the picking village that I had been building throughout the run and befriended all the pigs. Befriending these guys can be a little annoying since half the time they will give you stuff when you're trying to give them meat. I ended up befriending a total of 17 pigs, and looking back on the footage, I can't believe I gave the last one of my tall Scotch eggs when I had a bunch of regular eggs in the fridge. I then took my army to the Bee Queen hive and started equipping my soldiers with football helmets and beekeeper hats. Once they were all geared up, I hammered the hive to start the fight. In phase 1, the strategy is to stay a bit away from Bee Queen and get a few hits in when I'm not surrounded by grumblebees. The pigs will naturally aggro onto her, so they're the ones dealing most of the damage. Pigs might be strong enough to get through phase 1, but despite their armor and numbers, this army is nowhere near strong enough to win. Knowing this, I intentionally held off on fighting Bee Queen until day 31, because tonight was a full moon, as well as one of the longest nights of the year. So at the dawn of night, not only does Wilba transform into Werewilba, but my regular pigman army turns into an army of armored super soldiers who get fully healed, have double the HP, increased attack power and frequency, and are immune to Bee Queen's primal scream. This army is strong enough to take her down, so I let the Werepigs tear the queen up while getting some shots in while her Grumblebees aren't protecting her. In her screaming phases, I try to stay far away from her until she initiates her scream, because if done correctly, her Grumblebees will completely ignore me, which lets me slash away at the queen without resistance. Once she's on the brink of death, I put everything to sleep with the pan flute and finish her off. It's really important to do this, since the Werepigs will eat all the loot if they are still awake when she is defeated. With Bee Queen dead, that makes 4 raid bosses. The next one on the list is Dragonfly. Before that, I needed to make a new pan flute since the one I had was already half spent. After getting that and turning all the royal jelly into jelly beans, I headed to Dragonfly Desert, put my beefalo away, and ate 2 monster meat to turn into the beast. Dragonfly is one of Werewilba's tougher opponents, since it has a ton of HP, deals 75 damage per hit, and has a kiting pattern that punishes you for dodging too early and too late. At the same time, the Dragonfly fight shows just how ridiculous Wilba's attack speed can get. With regular attack speed, the player would land 6 hits on Dragonfly before having to dodge her, but with animation cancelling, Werewilba can get 8, 9, and sometimes even 10 hits on Dragonfly in between attacks. If I wanted to play safe, I just go for 8, however this is an S Tier Wilba video, and I want to feel the rush of putting myself in constant danger, so I shoot for 9. Because I'm attacking so fast, Dragonfly's HP drops to 22,000 very quickly, at which point she flies off to start spawning lava. Usually you'd want to build walls in order to block these guys off, however Werewilba's high attack speed lets her kill them off very quickly, and her super movement speed allows her to outrun them if Dragonfly decides to double spawn, so I forgo walls and engage the lava in the arena. I keep an eye out for the last lava that Dragonfly spawns, since killing it guarantees Dragonfly will enrage instead of starting another round of lava spawning. At the beginning of the video, I said Wilba's major downside is that she can't take a lot of hits. However, that doesn't apply if you spread those hits apart. I believe I take over 300 points of damage, but since I spread that damage out across 7 minutes, Wilba's regeneration had enough time to heal her up, which lets me leave the fight somewhat near full. At the dawn of day 34, Dragonfly drops dead, signaling the victory of one of Wilba's tougher battles. Since I'm in the Dragonfly Desert, I ate more monster meat in order to extend the duration of the wereform and use the extra time to kill deer claps, because the Ibrella will really come in handy during summer and spring. After After Klaus is defeated, I decided to take on the Hound Fortress to increase my stock of pierogies and monster food. I then used the remaining part of Were form to pick all the cactus in the desert, since all the damage that Wilba sustains from picking them is quickly healed up by her regeneration. After turning back into regular Wilba, I turned the Klaus eyeball into an umbrella and started preparing for all the cave bosses. I bundled 2 of the glass cutters, the nightmare amulet, and the shadow atrium together. I made another bundle containing 6 pierogies, a stack of cactus, a hammer, and a door. Basically all this stuff was for the Fuelweaver fight. After getting a bunch of meaty stew, bacon and eggs, and cactus for food, as well as picking up the yellow gems from Dragonfly, I finally headed back into the caves. The first boss I will be fighting down here is Toadstool, but before that, I needed to free the Nightmare Werepig, since I won't be able to use tools while in Were form. So after using the pig/axe to free him, I go to Toadstool, put my beefalo and piggyback away from the arena, and dropped all my food items on the ground, away from the pond that I will be luring Toadstool around. Then I ate 2 monster meat to transform into a Werewilba, and chopped Toadstool's cap to wake him up. Toadstool has 52,500 HP, making him by far the tankiest boss in this run. Usually you'd bring a ton of weapons to this fight, since Toadstool's spore caps will quickly spoil your handbat. However, Wilba doesn't suffer from this problem, since she can slash as many times as she wants. With her super speed and night vision, avoiding Toadstool's powerful boom shrooms isn't difficult in phase 1 and 2, so I played very aggressively and dropped his health quite a bit before he starts to summon spore caps. Once he starts to spawn them, I continue to attack until he has 5 up. At this point I start pre-chopping the trees to make them easier to cut down later. Each slash from Werewilba is equal to 2 chops from an axe, so she's almost as good as chopping these as Woody, making her overall well suited to countering Toad. After all 8 spore caps are up, I take advantage of Toadstool's enhanced speed to bring him behind the pond, and once there I pan-flute him to sleep. Then I get to chopping down the spore caps. Once all of them are chopped, I'm back to fighting Toadstool. The strategy from here on out is just dodge his boom shrooms and get as many attacks on him while positioning him on the outside of the pond. After 45 seconds of fighting, Toadstool tries to walk back to the center while completely ignoring Wilba. This is why we wanted to lure him behind the pond, because it keeps him in place, making him a stationary punching bag. After failing to get back to the middle for 15 seconds, Toadstool will begin to spawn another round of spore caps. Werewilba just rips them apart and resumes fighting Toad after that. Because I'm attacking so quickly, it's not long before Toadstool gets dropped to phase 2. This phase is no different than phase 1. I didn't mention this before, but although Toadstool is easy to dodge, he's still very dangerous, considering that a single boom shroom can deal up to 250 damage depending on how powered up Toadstool is, and it's possible to get hit by more than one of these, which means he has the potential to one-shot. Even though I'm doing a lot of damage, there's no way I'm draining Toadstool's entire health bar before my hunger runs out. So when Wilba begins to starve, I pan-flute Toadstool to sleep and eat a meaty stew and another monster meat. The reason I don't keep these on me is because they would have been turned to rot by now due to the spoilage effect of the spore bombs. I eat a monster meat because while the meaty stew restores my hunger by 150 points, it doesn't extend the Werepig timer. Eating the monster meat extends it by 4 minutes, which stops me from transforming in the middle of this boss fight. Once Toadstool's health drops to 21,000, he enters phase 3, which is way more dangerous than phases 1 and 2. In phase 3, he will now do double stomps, with each stomp dealing 100 base damage and getting stronger if he has spore caps up. This means he can 2-shot or even 1-shot Werewilba, even if she's at full health. In addition to the direct damage, every time he stomps, a bunch of minerals will fall from the ceiling, which deals 20 damage, and the hit stun can interfere with her attacks as well as her ability to kite, so I make sure to treat Toadstool with much more caution in this phase than the last one. Of course, any Don't Starve Together boss rush wouldn't be complete without some random interference. This time it comes in the form of depth worms. I just put Toadstool to sleep so I can deal with them before finishing Toadstool off. The fight took 13 minutes, which is way slower than what monsters like Max Potential Wigford can do, but still pretty good considering I had to waste a bunch of time dealing with depth worms and I didn't have to use any resources for the fight other than a few meaty stews. With Toadstool down, there were 2 more bosses to beat before I could head to the surface, leaving my Beefalo and Piggyback behind. I picked up all the food around the arena and headed to the Nightmare Werepig. Wilba's claw attacks aren't strong enough to free him from the pillars, which is why I did it earlier. Using the green mushrooms that Toadstool dropped, I went insane and killed the Shadlings in order to start the fight. Wilba fights the Nightmare Werepig like any other character, except her complete night vision and super speed makes it a lot easier, while her lack of defenses makes the fight extremely risky, especially in the second phase. Werepig Wilba versus the Nightmare Werepig is a pretty funny fight if you think about it. On one hand, you have Wilba, a child who's smaller than a regular pigman, and on the other hand, you have this roided up giant pig monster who smashes unbreakable pillars like they're nothing. Yet he still gets torn apart like every other boss Wilba has faced so far. Once his health drops below 5,000, he starts to smash instead of slam. I do what you're supposed to do and get him to smash the pillars because the dreadstone that the pillars drop will allow me to activate the rifts. Once the Nightmare Werepig's health drops to 3,000, he's in his final and most dangerous phase. Instead of smashing or slamming, he'll body slam Wilba and immediately follow it up with a smash. This 2-hit combo can be extremely devastating for Wilba, as it'll drain her for more than half of her HP, so I approach this phase with extreme caution. After forcing the Nightmare Werepig to bow to the princess, I get his blueprints to restore my sanity and grab the dreadstone. I had eaten a bunch of monster meat, so I needed to kill some time while I waited for the were form to expire. So I went to the stalagmite biome and massacred spiders and their homes in order to get the rest of the fossil pieces for Fuelweaver. Then I went to the green mushy forest and dug up a bunch of green caps, because these will help with the celestial champion fight. I did the same thing in the blue mushy forest for the same reason. By the time I did all that and got back to my Beefalo, Wilba reverted to normal, which let me resume the Fuelweaver route. I then headed to the ruins and crafted the Lazy Explorer, Twilightite crowns, and Magi that I'll be using for the next boss fight. I set up walls on a door next to the edge of the abyss and cheated myself into the void. Shortly after, I found the Fuelweaver arena and teleported inside, built the correct statue, and prepared all the armor, healing, weaponry, and equipment I'd need. I won't be using Wilba for the Fuelweaver fight. I don't think the fight is nearly as impossible as trying to do it as something like the Weremoose, but it's both tedious and on a completely different level of difficulty compared to the rest of the fights, since Wilba has no way of getting out of the bone cage, so if she gets caught even once, she's pretty much dead. So I'm going to be doing this fight as normal Wilba, which means I'm basically Wilson, who doesn't have extra affinity damage and with extra vulnerability to insanity. Once I've got everything ready, I inserted the Shadow Atrium to start the fight. I'm using the glass cutters I made back on Lunar Island for my weapons, and Philosite crowns I crafted in the ruins for my armor. In the first phase, if you keep Fuelweaver in the arena circle and dodge his bone snare, he won't use the move for quite some time, so I make sure to dodge it and then start cutting all of his regular attacks. By the way, if you look closely at my swings, you'll notice that I end up missing quite a few of them. This is because I had been using Wilba so much throughout the run that I got used to her extremely fast attack speed, which kinda messed up with timing for animation cancelling regular attacks. So if you're going to use Wilba, just remember to dial down your animation cancelling when fighting the old-fashioned way. Once Fuelweaver's HP was slightly above 10,000, I brought him into a corner and tanked him until he became invincible, signaling the start of phase 2. In this phase, he summons Woven Shadows that heal him for 400 HP if he manages to eat them. Because I really don't want that to happen, I keep him on the outside of the arena while cutting his bone snares and killing the Woven Shadows that are in his path. After allowing the Woven Shadows to bunch up, I walk him around the arena in a circle while destroying the Unseen Hands along the way. The Unseen Hands power his shield and can only be destroyed when your character is insane, so I flash the Nightmare Amulet on and off to destroy them. After doing a 360, I lure him into a corner before destroying the last hand and start to tank and spank. The Woven Shadows will eventually die off before they're able to crawl to him, so Wilba is free to swing away without concern. After 20 seconds, Fuelweaver puts his shield up again and eventually summons Woven Shadows. From here on, I simply repeat what I did before until he's dead. After a couple of screw-ups, Fuelweaver is defeated. I then give the 5 Dreadstone to the Shadow Hand in order to trigger the Charlie cutscene. After picking up all my belongings, I got back into the void by hopping on my Beefalo and headed back to the ruins. With Fuelweaver defeated, the ruins regenerated. This means I could mine statues and, more importantly, kill bishops to get more purple gems, because I'll need a bunch of these for Pearl's tasks in Crab King. So I went on another killing spree, making sure to rip apart every clockwork bishop I could find. I also decided to kill the Ancient Guardian again because he's a fun boss, drops a bunch of meat, and I needed to kill time while I waited for Wilba's awareness to drain. After he died, I picked up his loot, transformed back to normal, went back into the labyrinth to loot the large ornate chest, then got back on my beefalo, exchanged items at the completed station, and finally headed out of the caves. Back at base, it was finally time to do Pearl's chores. I spent a few days collecting the materials I needed, such as the telelocator staffs and grass, and I brought both sanctum pieces to the lunar island raft. While I was making some meatballs, a couple of mosslings stole it right out of the crock pot. Before this happened, I was on the fence about whether I should get a luxury fan for summer, but this sealed the deal. So I went Werewolf mode and killed the mother and all her children. A while after, I realized I had forgotten to get the chair blueprint from the ruins, so I ran all the way back to the wilds as Werewolf, killed the resting Har to get his blueprint, went back to the surface, and stole a bunch of tall bird eggs, before getting back to base. I then spent the next few days making food, catching butterflies, shaving beefalo, and getting fireflies, and finally on day 52, I set sail off the coast of Dragonfly Desert to Lunar Island, and then from Lunar Island to Pearl. Once there, I started to work on her chores. I killed the lure plant for the first point of friendship. I then hung kelp on her dragon rack for friendship point number 2. I got the sawhorse blueprint by building her a stone chair, and planted all 10 flowers to get her friendship point 3. I then crafted the sawhorse and made a wooden chair for later. With that stuff done, I started my search for the cookie cutter shells. I had hilariously bad luck with finding these guys. Long story short, I ended up doing a circle around the entire map before finding basically all the salt formations on the opposite side of Pearl's Island from where I set sail off. In other words, I had probably the worst possible luck one could get. Anyways, after I had a good laugh at my horrible luck, I went back to Pearl's Island to complete the rest of her chores. I used the cookie cutter shells and the rest of the materials I brought along in Chester to upgrade her house from level 1, 2, and 3. Next, I used a telelocator staff to make it rain, which allowed me to give her the pretty parasol for point number 7. After that, I built her a wooden chair for friendship point 8. I then planted and fertilized the 8 berry bushes for the 9th point of friendship, and spent the night picking up all the trash around Pearl's Island for the final point. The next day, I was rewarded with Pearl's Pearl. After completing the most tedious part of the run, I am rewarded for my efforts with the opportunity to fight the worst boss in the game, Crab King. So I used the telelocator staff to go from Pearl's Island back to the mainland, catch a bunch of killer bees, launch another raft off the coast of Dragonfly Desert, and paddle to Crab King. Once there, I socketed Pearl's Pearl and 7 purple gems. Then I released all the killer bees and put them to sleep with the pan flute. After that, I woke up Crab King by giving him the final purple gem and teleported to the other grass raft and quickly paddled out of the range of his geysers. The killer bees are so numerous and attack Crab King so frequently that he has no shot at healing, so all I need to do is dodge his geysers while his health gets drained. After Crab King is defeated, I put everything to sleep with a pan flute and quickly retrieve the Celestial Tribute and get out of there. Crab King wasn't all that far away from Lunar, so I paddled to Lunar straight from there and moved the Celestial Tribute and the Sanctum pieces to the altar and plugged all of them in to start the Moonstorms. Right before the Moonstorms could take effect, I made sure to equip Wilba's silver necklace. Going forward, I'll have to keep the necklace worn at all times in order to prevent her transformation. Unfortunately, I made a big mistake by not paying attention to my crops and picking the potatoes when they were grown. Because I neglected to do this, all of them rotted, which means I'd have to wait days before I could make astragals for the Moonstorms. So I went with plan B, which was to fish up some desert goggle blueprints from the Oasis Pond. After about a day of fishing, I got the blueprint, and soon after, I had a pair of desert goggles that are better than astragals in basically every way. With the goggles, I completed the Moonstorms the usual way, except since I needed to have the silver necklace equipped, I did them without armor and without the extra speed of the Magi. After helping out Wagstaff 3 times, as well as catching moon gleams and mining for charged moonglass, I had everything I needed to finally summon the Celestial Champion. On day 69, I completed Wagstaff's experiment to call the final boss down. Out of all the bosses in this run, the Celestial Champion is the most dangerous fight for Werewolf, because in every phase, it has rapid attacks that have the potential to one-shot her. The one to look out for in phase 1 is its rolling attack that deals 125 damage and has the potential to hit multiple times. Despite this, phase 1 isn't much of an issue since Wilba is so fast and his attacks are all telegraphed. After phase 1 is defeated, it morphs into its second phase. This is where things get legitimately dangerous. Phase 2's Gestalt attack hits 3 times and deals well over 100 damage, so Wilba really doesn't want to get hit by these. Even more dangerous is CC's new spinning attack. If Wilba gets caught up in this, she's as good as dead since each hit does 100 damage and it can hit her more than 5 times. Despite CC having the potential to one-shot and being much more dangerous than phase 1, its attacks are still predictable, and if you know how to dodge them when fighting CC normally, you're not going to have an issue dodging them when moving at Werepig speed. Once phase 2's 13,000 HP is drained to 0, it dies and transforms into its final form. This one's on a completely different level of difficulty for Wilba. The falling snares deal 37.5 damage and are difficult to avoid. Its lasers do 112.5 damage, hit twice, and if you're close enough, they can stack on each other, meaning they have the potential to instantly kill Wilba. The close range melee attack does 112.5 damage as well, and hits multiple times, so getting caught in it will leave you with very little health left. A Gestalt spawns every time CC destroys one of its own snares, and getting put to sleep by one of these guys will almost certainly mean Wilba will be eating 2 lasers. The entire reason I brought the stack of green and blue caps to this fight was to deal with phase 3. To make matters even worse, for some reason Wilba's claw attacks don't stunlock CC the way Beefalo or regular melee attacks from other characters do. This means it's way more difficult for Wilba to deal damage to him, since he'll be constantly running away and into a sea of his snares. So yeah, CC phase 3 is Wilba's worst matchup, but that's a good thing since he's one of the final bosses, so it's fitting that we save the hardest challenge for last. Towards the end of day 70, I deliver the final blow to CC, which spells the end of the last raid boss of this run. With that, we beat the Shadow Pieces, Klaus, the Twins of Terror, Being Queen, Dragonfly, Toadstool, the Ancient Fuelweaver, Crab King, and the Celestial Champion, just barely before the end of the first year. Most important of all, we did it using the unique abilities of the Pig Princess herself, proving that despite being a Don't Starve exclusive character, her unique abilities can still topple the strongest bosses in DST. If you've stuck around to the end of this video, you have my gratitude and respect, and if you want to know how to play as Wilba and Don't Starve together, the link to the Hamlet mod is in this video's description. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Like always, thanks for watching, take care and have a great day.